This is AMTV. Hello there everyone, and welcome to part 23 of this series looking at the history and impact of Doctor Who viewing figures. If you're joining us for the first time, a very warm welcome to you. We hope you stick around for future instalments and check out our previous episodes. We've covered the first 5 Doctors eras and the first season of the 6th Doctor. But for now, sit back, relax, and join me once again as we delve back into the wonderfully niche world of Doctor Who viewing figures. Our destination? Season 23. It's the autumn of 1986, and after an 18-month break, viewers were finally getting ready again to sit down and enjoy new episodes of Doctor Who on a Saturday night. The announcement of the hiatus had come as quite a shock, not just to audiences, but the team making the programme as well. BBC One controller, Michael Grade, believed the show was too tired and too violent, instructing the production team to tone down the nastiness and find the sense of fun that he felt the programme had been lacking for some time. With this in mind, producer John Nathan Turner had some truly tough decisions to make. To start with, all existing scripts that had been lined up for season 23 were scrapped. However, many of them can be enjoyed today, either as target books or via audio adaptations from Big Finish. In the place of these original scripts, the decision was taken to produce one long story that would play out across the entire season. The story chosen ran with the idea of the Doctor being placed on trial by the Time Lords. Borrowing a motif from Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, 3 adventures marking the Doctor's past, present and future would take place within the trial framework before concluding events in the final 2 episodes. Part of what influenced this one long story idea was the change to the series format yet again. Having experimented with 45-minute episodes during season 22, higher-ups at the BBC believed that ultimately it hadn't been a success, despite the season attracting an overall average of over 7 million viewers. To this end, season 23 of Doctor Who would mark a return to the more familiar 25-minute episode structure, with 14 of them allocated to the production. These 14 25-minute episodes would mean that season 23 would be the shortest season of Doctor Who thus far. Despite all these setbacks, the production team got to work and began to piece together the 14-part epic that would be known as the Trial of a Time Lord. For Colin Baker, this would mark his 2nd season as the 6th Doctor. Unfortunately for him, it would also turn out to be his last. But more on that when we get there. For now, let's dive into season 23 and see how the Doctor came to be on trial and the grave implications it could have for him if he should be found guilty. The first segment of the Trial of a Time Lord is the mysterious planet. Put on trial by the Time Lords, the Doctor stands accused of causing harm to those he has encountered on his travels. An adventure on the planet Ravalox is presented as evidence for the prosecution by the Valeyard. This segment is comprised of 4 episodes, which began airing on the 6th of September 1986 and concluded on the 27th of the same month. Here are the individual viewing figures for all 4 episodes, and wow, this is not the comeback that the Doctor Who team were expecting. It seems that the 18-month hiatus had done its damage, as the opening instalment only managed to draw in 4.9 million viewers. This was matched the following week for part 2, but 1 week after that, 1 million viewers dipped out of the adventure, lowering the ratings down to 3.9 million, the first time the programme had dipped below 4 million since 1980. Part 4 continued to lower the viewing figures for the opening segment, reaching a result of 3.7 million viewers. These numbers are some of the lowest ever attained by a Doctor Who story up to this point, and it casts a dark cloud over what was meant to be the series' triumphant return to BBC One. When looking at the top 40 programmes, despite disastrous viewing figures, all 4 parts were able to stay within the top 100 programmes. Part 3 comes the closest to triple digits, charting at 98th, with Part 4 just 1 spot above at 97th. Part 2 ranks considerably higher at 75th, with Part 1 proving to take the leading position, finishing off at 69th place. Doctor Who hadn't been able to crack the top 40 in quite some time, and despite not falling below 100th, it does make you wonder whether the show will ever be able to make it in that prestigious chart once again. So the obvious question would be, what on earth happened? After an 18-month break from screens and with a loyal viewership ready for the Doctor's return, how come the many millions who tuned in before didn't return this time around? The first factor we must address, of course, is the 18-month hiatus itself. Between March of 1985 and September of 1986, fans had to turn to other mediums to get their Doctor Who fix. The target novels were still being released every month, and in the summer, an official audio adventure was broadcast on the radio. Written by script editor Eric Saywood and broadcast on children's station Pirate Radio 4, Slipback was a 6-part adventure comprised of 10-minute episodes. and broadcast across July and August 1985. It's a harmless bit of fun to say the least, but it left an even greater desire for the Time Lord to return to television as soon as possible. He did return briefly in the autumn, in the form of a parody skit as part of The Lenny Henry Show, in which the titular comedian takes on the role of the Doctor, and he and Peri battle the evil Thatchos, her husband Denos, and make a not-so-subtle jab at the show's extended break off air. Fun and games aside, these little forays into radio or the realm of parody didn't fully meet the appetites of the ever-hungry fanbase. Those who desired information constantly could always indulge in Doctor Who magazine, which had been running since 1979, as well as various fanzines that were popular at that time, the most prolific arguably being Doctor Who Bulletin, or DWB for short, which began to grow ever critical of the show's producer, John Nathan Turner, who himself was about to helm his 6th series in the role. But as the autumn season of 1986 drew closer, every possible effort was made in the promotional department to get the programme right back into the consciousness of the viewing public. As a result, there were several stories and articles in the print world promoting the series' return, as well as several TV appearances too. In August of 1986, Colin Baker was interviewed on Open Air and soon after appeared alongside Lynda Bellingham on an episode of the popular chat show Wogan, to once again promote the series' upcoming return to BBC One. On the morning of Part 1's broadcast, the Saturday Picture Show touted an appearance from Bonnie Langford, who was due to become the new companion in a matter of weeks, but more on that when we get there. Finally, between Parts 2 and 3, Colin, Bonnie and Nabil Shaban made an appearance on leading children's programme Blue Peter, to showcase various monsters from the new season. As well as interviews, trailers began to pop up, quickly establishing the trial theme that would run throughout the new season. With promotional efforts being at their strongest in years, was it perhaps the competition over at ITV that prevented Doctor Who from achieving its triumphant return? The answer there is quite possibly. Going up against Doctor Who once again was the American action series, The A-Team. This show had faced the Time Lord in both 1984 and 1985, and on both occasions managed to not only attract high viewership, but was also creating a dilemma for those who only had one television in the house, and in some cases, no means of recording the programme. Whilst VCRs were becoming more popular year after year, those watching after broadcasts weren't included on the viewing figures results, and wouldn't be for several years to come. And for those who didn't have a VCR, with the A-Team having a 10-minute head start, perhaps viewers watching the other side were less inclined to change the channel once they were already partway into an exciting venture with Mr. T and Co. But even though the A-Team was still really popular and undoubtedly stole a sizable chunk of viewers away from Doctor Who, it was arguably the programmes that preceded the TARDIS team that could have done even greater damage. For the first programme of BBC One's Saturday evening lineup was Roland Rat, the series. After having been credited for saving ITV's fledgling breakfast programme TV AM, Roland eventually moved over to the BBC, in which he was given his own pseudo-chat show, which was expected to be a great success. Unfortunately for the Beeb, Roland Rat the series was anything but successful, proving to be a ratings disaster and failing to chart within the top 100 programmes. And it's reasonable to assume that if audience members were put off by Roland's antics on BBC One, they were highly likely to change the channel and to stick with whatever they were offering, neglecting to change back for when Doctor Who started, especially when considering the 10-minute lead held by the A-Team. The Time Lord and the Rodent crossed over somewhat too. On the night of Part 2's broadcast, Colin Baker recorded an appearance as the Doctor, introducing Roland Rat the series, and then providing linking continuity into his own programme. It's a shame that less than 5 million viewers tuned in for the opening instalment of The Trial of a Time Lord, as this first segment feels particularly refreshing and so full of life. Despite the extended break, the production team went to every effort to prove that Doctor Who still had a place within the Saturday night schedules. This is no clearer than in the opening shot of Part 1, in which we see a vast space station, which ends up pulling in the TARDIS, establishing the setting for the Doctor's trial. This sequence costs several thousands of pounds, a great deal of the show's budget, but its intention of giving Doctor Who impressive and modern-looking visuals absolutely worked. It still looks incredible today and stands out as one of the series' greatest visual effects moments. We are introduced to the main players of this trial, namely the Inquisitor and the prosecuting Valeyard, played wonderfully by Lynda Bellingham and Michael Jayston respectively. The past segment itself is a fun, if slightly paint-by-numbers Who adventure. It's great seeing the Doctor and Peri do something other than bicker all the time, and the introduction of vibrant characters such as Glitz and Dibber really help keep the serial moving whilst remaining very entertaining. Joan Sims is the leading guest star, playing Queen Katrika, and having been the star of several Carry On films, it was hoped that her presence would have attracted perhaps some of the older patrons within the audience. This segment was penned by Robert Holmes, former script editor, and one of the most prolific writers to ever have contributed to the programme. The Mysterious Planet may not be the most memorable of Holmes' scripts, but it still contains his trademark writing style that never fails to be interesting at the very least. There are some effects that even by 1986 standards look a little ropey, but that aside, these 4 parts are an exciting start to the trial season. Even though the cuts back to the courtroom can feel a little annoying, removing us from the action, they did serve as a reminder to the one central story, and as a reminder of the fine line that the show was walking on. Overall, this segment attracted an average of 4.4 million viewers, a whopping 3.2 million drop from the previous broadcast story, Revelation of the Daleks. This is a disastrous result to say the least, and is the lowest average that Doctor Who has recorded thus far in its first 23 years on the air. It seems the extended gap in transmission, the strong competition, and the off-putting preceding programmes all contributed to audiences flocking away from the Doctor's trial, and I'm sure it served as a harsh wake-up call to both the production team and indeed the BBC. The Mysterious Planet can often be overlooked when analysing the various trial segments, and whilst it may get lost when compared to other Robert Holmes' scripts, it's one you should still check out and give your attention to. Some call it a bit standard, but it's always nice to have a straightforward adventure every now and then. To discover the mysteries of Ravalox for yourself, you can read the Target book from 1987, or an audio adaptation from 2013, in which it was bundled with the following segment, Mindwarp, and this reading was re-released together with all the remaining episodes of Trial in a collection set in 2020. To watch it, you have the VHS box set release from 1993, which came packaged within a lovely TARDIS tin, and on DVD, it again was released as part of a Trial of a Time Lord box set, which hit shop shelves in 2008. Over a decade later, the segment would debut on the Blu-ray format, as part of the Season 23 collection set, released in 2019. To kickstart a 14-part epic is no easy feat, but for the most part, The Mysterious Planet I believe succeeds in providing an exciting adventure to bring audiences back in, whilst setting up the grander stakes of the Doctor's trial and foreshadowing what perils could be coming up. And it seems that the man who postponed Doctor Who, Michael Grade, thought this too. Now part of the BBC board as Director of Programmes, at a BBC One Drama press launch in early August, Grade congratulated producer John Nathan Turner as he found the opening instalment very enjoyable. Now, whether he would retain this enjoyment for the rest of the season, we'll just have to wait and see.
Oh yes, Doctor, much better. The most damning is still to come. And when I have finished, this court will demand your life.
The second segment of the Trial of a Time Lord is Mindwarp. As the Doctor's trial continues, further evidence against him is presented in the form of his recent visit to Thoros Beta. There he once again encountered his old adversary, Syl, and a scientist conducting a series of horrific experiments on living creatures. This segment is comprised of 4 episodes, which began airing on the 4th of October, 1986, and concluded on the 25th of the same month. Here are the individual viewing figures for all 4 episodes, and we can see that there's been some improvement, but sadly it remains a far cry from the numbers the programme was pulling in the previous year. Parts 5 and 6 pick up 1 million viewers from The Mysterious Planet, drawing in 4.8 and 4.6 million viewers respectively, and with 5.1 million tuning in for Part 7, this marks the first occasion in Season 23 in which that barrier is broken. Part 8 holds out at bang on 5 million, and whilst it's higher than the first 4 episodes, it's hardly a show of strength, especially when compared to the previous few years. In regards to the top 40 programmes chart, all 4 parts managed to remain within the top 100, a reassuring sight to say the least. Parts 6 and 7 tie for the weakest position, both of them finishing at 87th. Part 8 eclipses them slightly at 84th, and Part 5 takes the winning spot, rounding off at 76th place on the chart. I must admit, I'm surprised that with the lower than average viewing figures, the fact that Doctor Who was routinely finding a place within the top 100 is still quite impressive. So, as the second segment of the trial played out, it was apparent that more viewers were tuning in. But what was holding Doctor Who back from greater heights in the ratings table? Well, the competition over at ITV was absolutely demolishing Doctor Who when it came to audiences. Mindwarp's peak viewership was just over 5 million, whereas the A-Team were routinely getting double, with over 10 million viewers tuning in for each new instalment. However, again, it must be noted that despite being miles away from Mr. T and co., Doctor Who's viewership was steadily increasing and remaining within the top 100. Gotta take those small victories where we can. Promotional efforts were still present for the segment, but arguably nowhere near the level of what we saw for The Mysterious Planet. Nabil Shaban made an appearance as Syl on Blue Peter in September, as mentioned previously, and the actor also gave a few interviews to various publications on the Sinister Slug's return. Other guest stars were also given a bit of media spotlight, including Christopher Ryan, who would be playing the mentor Kiv, and of course Brian Blessed, who was playing King Yrcanos. Speaking of special appearances, Bonnie Langford made one on the popular chat show Wogan, which was broadcast between parts 6 and 7. Promoting her upcoming role as the future companion, viewers would have to wait a few weeks more before meeting Bonnie's character on screen, but it seems the production team were trying to hype up her role as much as possible, considering Bonnie's success as both a child and adult performer. Finally, during the transmission of Mindwarp, little bouts of promotion occurred after the conclusion of each episode, advertising either the steadily growing library of Doctor Who VHS tapes or the exhibition in Longleat, which had been running successfully for several years. Mindwarp is often considered to be the high point of the Trial saga, and in many respects, I couldn't agree more. This is arguably the darkest that Season 23 dares to get, with a focus on brain alteration, metamorphosis, and the rather shocking conclusion and the horrors that befall poor Peri. This segment was written by Philip Martyn, who had contributed Vengeance on Varos to Season 22 the previous year. I adored the world that he built on Varos, and that adoration continues into how he's crafted Thoros Beta. The character work for the most part is excellent, and the guest stars are really giving it everything they've got. Particularly Brian Blessed, whose presence is hard to miss with his big booming voice and mildly humorous outbursts. Nabil Shabar makes a wonderfully sinister return as Syl, and the additional lore we have regarding his planet and his superiors, the Mentors, is fascinating. But perhaps the biggest revelations occur towards the segment's end, when the Doctor is taken out of time by the Time Lords, thus bringing him to the events of his trial. Without the Doctor, Peri is left to the mercy of Dr. Crozier and his increasingly ill patient, Kiv. With her head shaved and Peri now being essentially dead, seeing Nicola Bryant embody the Kiv character is genuinely quite horrifying. One of the most spine-tingling moments of any Who story. It all makes for quite an emotional finale, one in which the Doctor is left in the courtroom both gobsmacked and seething with rage. A tantalising end to a superb segment. Overall, this segment attracted an average of 4.9 million viewers, a 0.5 increase from the previous 4 episodes. On one hand, it's reassuring that the viewership for Season 23 was steadily rising, with perhaps more people becoming aware that Doctor Who had indeed returned. However, on the other hand, for the programme to again score an average of under 5 million is heartbreaking, and the last time that this had occurred so frequently, it very nearly cost the show its life. However, the low ratings in no way represent Mindwarp in terms of its quality. From start to finish, this adventure is dark, bleak, and can achieve horrors and chills that very few stories from this time are able to do. It's an absolute must-watch, and if your curiosity is now sparked, you can read the Target book from 1989, or an audio adaptation from 2013, released together with The Mysterious Planet as Trial of a Time Lord Volume 1, or via the complete collection release from 2020. To watch it, you have the 1993 VHS set, the 2008 DVD box set, or the Season 23 collection set, which is exclusive to the Blu-ray format. It may be part of the full trial storyline, with frequent cuts to the courtroom, but all that aside, Mindwarp in my view stands as one of the crowning achievements when looking at 80s Who. It's a sci-fi tale that is taking itself seriously, with room for spouts of humour and whimsy as well. It delivers a shocking final few minutes, with one of the longest serving companions arguably meeting a fate worse than death, and seeing its reaction on the Doctor, we can only imagine what events will play out next.
The High Council has no right to order Peri's or anyone else's death.
Please, Doctor.
I was taken out of time for another reason, and I have every intention of finding out what it is.
The third and penultimate segment of the Trial of a Time Lord is Terror of the Vervoids. With the case for the prosecution completed in his trial, the Doctor must now present evidence in his defence. He selects an adventure from his own future, which takes place aboard a luxury starliner. A murderer is on the loose, along with the alien Vervoids. This segment is comprised of 4 episodes, which began airing on the 1st of November, 1986, and concluded on the 22nd of the same month. Here are the individual viewing figures for all 4 episodes, and once again, the numbers seem to be improving ever so slightly, but not to a level that would reassure the production team or the BBC higher-ups. 3 of the segment's 4 parts managed to crack the 5 million mark, Part 11 taking the victory, with 5.3 million viewers tuning in. The preceding week, Part 10 recorded the weakest viewership of the segment, with 4.6 million viewers watching the unfolding events on Hyperion 3. So we have a story that for the most part hovers within the 5 million range, but even back in 1986, that kind of ballpark was not seen as a roaring success for a Saturday night drama, especially one that had been as long running as Doctor Who. Looking over at the top 40 programmes, once again all 4 parts managed to stay within the top 100. Part 10 comes the closest to slipping out at 93rd, with Part 12 charting higher at 89th, Part 11 higher still at 86th, and Part 9 pipping them all, rounding off at 85th place. As the trial continued, it seems more and more viewers, however small an increase they may represent, were settling down to see what was going on. Was competition on ITV starting to finally slip? The firm answer to that, I'm afraid, is no. The A-Team continued its dominance of the Saturday tea time slot over on ITV, and just to give mention to Channel 4, which had been broadcasting since 1982, they were airing their increasingly popular soap opera, Brookside. This show had aired since Channel 4's inception, but only recently was beginning to receive a bit more noticeable traction amongst viewers. So, with ITV competition being exceedingly popular and Channel 4's offerings up on the rise, Doctor Who was stacked against some pretty heavy odds. Promotion-wise though, this time period saw a sort of second wave for season 23 in terms of press attention. The main source of this was the arrival of Bonnie Langford as new companion Melanie Bush, or just Mel for short. Bonnie was a well-known face for British TV viewers, having made her name as a child star, mostly as Violet Elizabeth Bott in the children's series Just William. As an adult, she continued her success on the stage in a variety of musicals, and as such, early promotional photographs were issued with both Colin Baker as the Doctor and Bonnie dressed in her then most recent stage role of Peter Pan. Bonnie's arrival had already been well known to viewers for weeks, as she had made appearances on a variety of different programmes to help promote the season. She also was the main feature of the Radio Times back page. A full-colour spread was dedicated to her debut as the latest member of the TARDIS team. Her role as companion was either met with enthusiasm by some, or disdain by others, long before she'd actually done anything on the programme. Nothing new there then. On the topic of companions, producer John Nathan Turner made an appearance on the BBC's Breakfast Time programme a week or two before the terror of the Vervoids to promote the release of his new book, Doctor Who: The Companions. Joined by former assistant Janet Fielding and outgoing assistant Nicola Bryant, JNT teased Mel's arrival to expectant viewers. However, criticism of the producer's handling of the show was growing even more feverish as the trial of the Time Lord went on. In fact, despite all of the positive press dedicated to Bonnie Langford, the papers also picked up on quite a tumultuous event that had happened behind the scenes. John Nathan Turner and script editor Eric Saywood hadn't always agreed on various aspects of Doctor Who, but they were still able to churn out some wonderful stories in their partnership together. However, due to events surrounding the final segment of the trial, Saywood had vacated the role and launched a scathing public attack on the producer. This story was blown up as Terror of the Vervoids was set to air, but seeing as the context surrounding it is centred around the final 2 episodes, we'll focus more on this when we get there. On the positive, the last little promotional push came with the release of Dominic Glynn's arrangement of the Doctor Who theme as a 7-inch single. After 6 years of Peter Howell's 80s reimagining of the iconic original, Glynn's version has a sinister, foreboding quality to it, one that I really enjoy, and it is actually one of my favourite variations of the theme overall. The track also saw a 12-inch and cassette release in 1987, bizarrely releasing nearly a year after the regular single. Terror of the Vervoids has a lot riding on it in a way. Not only does it have to continue on from the devastating impact of the Mindwarp segment, but it also has to introduce us to a new companion from the Doctor's future, robbing us of a traditional first meeting story, and trying to sell us that these two have been travelling together for some time. Not only that, but it has to set up a murder mystery plot, evoking the works of Agatha Christie, whilst juggling several characters as well as a sinister race of plant-like aliens. Quite a tall order, but alas, the writing team behind the segment, Pip and Jane Baker, was somehow able to get it done and make it work. These two were industry veterans, and had previously written season 22's Mark of the Rani. Their Who contributions may not be beloved by everyone, but I found this one in particular a really fun watch. Honor Blackman is the leading guest star, having made her name in the Avengers TV series before appearing as perhaps the most well-known Bond girl, Pussy Galore. Her appearance here is fantastic, and indeed I found most of the guest actors here give a great performance. The Vervoids are quite menacing in places, despite their somewhat interesting appearance, and whilst this may not be my favourite segment of the trial, it's arguably one of the most fun. Overall, this segment attracted an average of 5.1 million viewers, a 0.2 increase from the previous 4 episodes. We finally crossed over the 5 million barrier, which is reassuring in itself, but this achievement was something Doctor Who had routinely been breaking in its sleep for the majority of the past 20 years. Now, it almost seems like some sort of Herculean effort, but nevertheless, I'll always take a boost in ratings rather than a sharp decline. Terror of the Vervoids is often cited as the most traditional segment from season 23, one where if you remove the cuts back to the courtroom, it could easily serve as its own standalone adventure. If you wish to try and solve the mystery aboard Hyperion 3 for yourself, you can read the Target book from 1987 or an audio adaptation from 2013, packaged together with the following segment, The Ultimate Foe, as Trial of a Time Lord Volume 2. This was re-released with all the other trial segments in 2020. To watch it, you have either the VHS set from 1993, the DVD set from 2008, or the Season 23 collection set from 2019. The 4 episodes are a nice change of pace and tone from what we had just experienced with Mindwarp. Bonnie Langford is an adorably positive presence as Mel, and her dynamic with the Doctor works surprisingly well, especially considering we haven't seen how these two met. And when all is said and done, despite taking care of the Vervoids, the Doctor has now earned himself another charge, one of genocide, which leads us into the remaining 2 episodes and the Doctor's final confrontation with the Valeyard.
Article 7 permits no exceptions. The Doctor has destroyed a complete species. The charge must now be genocide.
The 4th and final segment from the Trial of a Time Lord is The Ultimate Foe. When Sabalom Glitz and Mel make an unexpected appearance at the Doctor's trial, the Doctor begins to suspect that the Time Lords have a hidden agenda. An old enemy also re-emerges, and the Valeyard's true identity is revealed. This segment is comprised of 2 episodes, which began airing on the 29th of November, 1986, and concluded the following week on the 6th of December. Here are the individual viewing figures for both episodes, and talk about a series in flux. Part 13 attracts one of the lowest ratings for the season, with just 4.4 million viewers tuning in. But for Part 14, the final part of the trial, Doctor Who saw an uplift of 1.2 million viewers, with 5.6 million switching on for the concluding instalment. This makes Part 14 the most viewed episode of the entire trial, implying that a small selection of that audience hadn't tuned into the preceding 13 weeks. But whilst 5.6 million may be the high point for Season 23, it serves as a crushing blow for Doctor Who as a whole. For that to be your strongest showing after 23 years of near continual success, it's quite heartbreaking. For the top 40 programmes, Part 13 came very close to slipping into triple digits, placing at 98th. But Part 14 manages to climb a fair degree higher on the chart, finishing off at 80th place. We may not have had any top 40 placings, but despite Season 23 getting low viewing figures, not seeing one episode fall below 100th place is a small victory to be celebrated and recognised. So we've reached the trial's end. All shall be revealed, and all the loose ends will be tied up. Hopefully. Then how come that influx of viewers only came for the very end? What was keeping them from the final setup? Well, for starters, the competition remained resilient right up until the very end. Whether it was the A-Team over at ITV or Brookside on the fledgling Channel 4, viewers were increasingly being given more and more choices in what programming they wished to dedicate their time to, which, for an old staple such as Doctor Who, could have only meant a few dents in its armour. Promotion-wise, Colin Baker made an appearance on Saturday Superstore on the day of Part 13's broadcast, the 29th of November. Celebrating the series' 23rd birthday and taking questions from viewers, Colin commented to one caller that if he had a TARDIS, he would go back 2.5 years and start his journey as the Doctor all over again. But what did he mean by this? He wasn't off already, was he? Unfortunately, and without much choice, he was. Doctor Who had its prospective 24th season greenlit way back in the August of 1986, ensuring the future of the programme, at least in the short term. However, as Season 23 progressed, Michael Grade would comment to producer John Nathan Turner that although he believed what he saw was an improvement, he felt the show still wasn't quite right. With supportive comments from head of drama series and serials, Jonathan Powell, the pair believed that the programme would continue with both a new producer and a new Doctor. JNT had wanted to move on for some time, but before he could depart, Grade and Powell gave him one final instruction: to inform Colin Baker that his contract would not be renewed, and his services as the Doctor would no longer be required. Worried that the news would leak to the press, JNT telephoned Colin in late October to give him the bad news. Baker was shocked and upset, as he had so much he still wanted to do with the part, and had been doing all these promotional appearances without so much as an inkling that Season 23 would be his last. After meeting with Jonathan Powell in early November, Colin presented his ultimatum. He offered that he would lead the next season, and then depart at the end of it, giving him a true third year in the role, considering one was missed due to the hiatus. Powell countered by offering him just the opening serial of the next season, to which Colin flatly declined. He felt hurt by the BBC higher-ups, quite rightly too. Nevertheless, he remained professional in all of his promotional obligations after he received the devastating news, including appearing on the Tomorrow's World Christmas quiz in December. Said news eventually did make its way to the press by the final months of 1986, and even after season 23 concluded and the world entered 1987, more stories were coming out about Colin's removal from the TARDIS. The actor himself gave a rather damning interview, criticising the actions of Michael Grade, feeling that he had truly been robbed of what he had initially planned to do with the role of the Time Lord. In response to all of this fallout, Michael Grade responded by saying to one interviewer, "The show is in trouble. It is very stale, but we will give it another go." If the loss of his lead actor wasn't enough, John Nathan Turner was ultimately instructed, not asked, to stay on as producer after all in the November of 1986. When trying to explain that there wasn't sufficient time to prepare a full new series, the higher-ups told him that he'd find a way to cope, and duly showed him out of the door. So, after losing battles to keep Colin Baker, and to move on from the series himself, what else could befall the producer? Well, how about an outcry from his exhausted script editor? Eric Saywood had held the position since 1981, and had gone to every effort to not only find writers who could provide suitable work for the series, but to also deliver some classic stories himself. For the final 2 episodes of the trial, Saywood had originally commissioned Robert Holmes with the task of wrapping up the trial saga. However, Holmes was becoming increasingly ill as 1986 progressed, ultimately passing away on the 24th of May. He had completed a rough draft for Part 13 and a plot outline for Part 14. Saywood, despite being bereaved at the loss of his friend, managed to adapt and build upon Holmes' Part 13, which is what eventually ended up on screen. With Part 14, however, this is where the trouble starts. Holmes' original ending saw the Doctor and the Valeyard falling to their deaths in a seemingly endless void, providing one extra cliffhanger moment that could be resolved in the next season. However, John Nathan Turner found this ending to be too downbeat, and believing it gave any detractors at the BBC all the ammunition they needed to take the show off the air once and for all. Saywood completely disagreed with JNT, and this served to be the straw that broke the camel's back. He not only resigned from the position of script editor, but he also withdrew permission for the Part 14 script to be used. With very little time left, JNT contracted Pip and Jane Baker, who had written the preceding Terror of the Vervoids, to write the final instalment instead. However, due to Saywood's withdrawal of permission, the Bakers were not allowed to view the original Part 14 script and weren't told any of its contents. So they had a small window of time to complete an episode that they had no idea of what had originally been intended. Now, that is a tall order for any creative, never mind an experienced duo of writers. The results leave The Ultimate Foe feeling like quite the mixed bag upon viewing. I really like Part 13 in what it sets up, the revelations that the Valeyard is an evil incarnation of the Doctor, the journey into the Matrix, and the limitless horrors it can yield, and the welcome return of Mel, Glitz, and even the Master, played once again by Anthony Ainley. Part 14, on the other hand, is a little botched. This is in no way any disrespect to Pip and Jane Baker, as they were given an impossible task at the very last minute. The fact that we got any sort of Part 14 at all is enough. However, the conclusion is very rushed, and in some aspects doesn't make the greatest of sense, or it certainly doesn't feel like a justified finale to this 14-week epic. It does, however, have a personal favourite line of mine.
There's nothing you can do to prevent the catharsis of spurious morality.
I mentioned earlier that JNT instructed that the ending be more upbeat, and indeed it was. With all charges against the Doctor dropped, he and Mel jump back into the TARDIS for some more new adventures. However, there is one further change made by JNT that I and many others feel is a bit unnecessary. Keeping with the positive theme, it's revealed that Peri didn't in fact meet her end in Mindwarp, but was actually alive and living as a warrior queen with King Yrcanos, with what we originally saw being a result of the Valeyard's tampering with the Matrix. Now, who wouldn't want to be married to Brian Blessed? I know I certainly would. But not only do we learn this information without actually seeing it occur, but it just removes so much of the weight and impact that Mindwarp originally had. All in all, it may not be the most satisfying end to the Trial of a Time Lord, but The Ultimate Foe in just 2 episodes gives a damn good go at trying to tie everything up, whilst giving us lots of new lore to dwell on. I'd recommend watching it, as part of the whole trial saga of course, and see what conclusions you come to, in how the Doctor was able to avoid death at seemingly his own future hand. Overall, this story attracted an average of 5 million viewers, a 0.1 drop from the previous 4 episodes. Whilst the drop may be minuscule, a 5 million average is still a poor showing for the programme. They tried everything they could promotionally and in the quality of the storytelling that we've seen for the most part, but it seems that aside from strong competition, Doctor Who just didn't have that same appeal anymore, at least to perhaps the more casual viewer. The Ultimate Foe may make hardly any sense when viewed on its own, but even with all of its misgivings, plot holes and rushed elements, it still succeeds in some level of providing an exciting finale, one in which Colin Baker gives a marvellous performance, even though sadly it would be his last. That aside, if you're desperate to find out how the trial concludes, you can read the Target book from 1988, or an audio adaptation from 2013, making up half of The Trial of a Time Lord Volume 2, and later making up a quarter of the full trial collection, which was released in 2020. To watch it, you can select either the 1993 VHS set, the 2008 DVD release, or the Season 23 collection set, which is exclusive to Blu-ray and was released in 2019. Trying to summarise and round off a story across 14 instalments is a task that most would never dare attempt, but the Doctor Who team always embraced a challenge. And considering this particular challenge had the series' future at stake, they needed to give it everything that they got. The Ultimate Foe may have been besieged with problems and lost publicly within the press attention from Colin's sacking and the fallout from Eric Saywood's resignation, but still, give it a fair chance. It's a respectable end to the longest and most ambitious saga the show had attempted to tell so far.
Repair the Matrix Keeper. Requisition anything you need.
My lady.
So that's Season 23, the 4 segments that comprise the overall story, and the ratings that they garnered. With the transmission of Part 14 of The Trial of a Time Lord, Season 23 was brought to an end, concluding a 3-month run comprised of 14 episodes across one story, divided into 4 segments. Now, let's have a look at the averages for this season. We can sadly see that the viewing figures remain quite low throughout the 14-part saga. The peak comes with parts 9 to 12, The Terror of the Vervoids, which managed to bring in 5.1 million viewers on average, whilst the least viewed segment was the opener, The Mysterious Planet, which recorded a new low for the programme at just 4.4 million. It seems that despite embracing one overarching story across the season, it didn't work to the degree that the production team had hoped. What was supposed to be Doctor Who's great comeback after an extended break ended up barely making a ripple in the television landscape. Now, as we always do, let's work out the overall average for this season. By combining the average ratings for each segment, we can calculate that the average viewing figures for Season 23 of Doctor Who stands at around roughly 4.9 million viewers. This is a colossal 2.3 million decrease from the previous season's average, and is the first occasion in which a full season of the programme averaged out at under 5 million viewers. This is not a good showing at all for Doctor Who, and really represents the low point that the series had sank to, not necessarily in terms of quality, but in terms of how it was being perceived by the mass audience. This sadly means that for our ratings chart, Season 23 places at the very bottom, as the least viewed season of Doctor Who on our journey thus far. It's almost 1 million lower than the previous last placeholder, which was Season 18, and considering that Season 22 also made the bottom 5, it's heartbreaking that an actor as good as Colin Baker just didn't have the best of luck when it came to the series' viewing figures. His first year in the role achieved respectable figures, no doubt. A 7.2 million average for an over 20-year-old programme in 1985 is no feat to be snuffed at, but the sheer drop in viewership in just 18 months is what makes this more gutting. But now, as we've reached the end of another Doctor's era, it's time we got really nerdy with numbers and work out the overall average for the Colin Baker years. By combining the results achieved from the Twin Dilemma, Season 22 and 23, we can calculate that the average viewing figures for the Colin Baker era of Doctor Who stands at around roughly 6.4 million viewers. I hate to say it, but this is the least viewed era of the programme thus far, as when you place it against other Doctors, it falls 0.7 million behind Troughton, 1.5 million behind Hartnell and Davison, 1.9 million behind Pertwee, and a staggering 3 million behind the indomitable Tom Baker. This result really goes to show how the significantly lower viewership of Season 23 really did its damage onto Colin's era of the show. Another respect in which I feel for Colin is in the amount of televised stories he had, there being only 8 of them. And whilst this is a far cry from what his 5 predecessors had, we have to remember 2 key factors. One being Season 22's 45-minute long episodes, and the fact that The Trial of a Time Lord was one story. It has segments for sure, but it is all one adventure. Had circumstances been different, and had Colin been allowed to remain in the role for as long as he originally had intended, I'm sure he would have had just as many, if not more adventures than those who'd come before him. Season 23 had a lot riding on its shoulders when it played out to audiences in the autumn of 1986. Not only did it have to establish Doctor Who's return as triumphantly as possible, but it also had to tell one overarching story across 14 weeks, something that hadn't been attempted to this magnitude for years. Furthermore, it had to juggle 3 segments within the trial setting, making sure everything links together, And it may have its criticisms, but I've always felt that the Trial of a Time Lord as a whole works surprisingly well. Sure, it has its ropey moments, and the conclusion may leave a lot to be desired, but there is so much good to delve into here. Whether it's the more straightforward, traditional fun of the mysterious planet or terror of the Vervoids, the dark, sinister style of Mindwarp, or the surprising revelations we see in The Ultimate Foe, there is arguably a little something here for everyone. It's a crying shame that the same level of viewership didn't return to witness the trial, but I suppose that shows how the viewing habits of the public can change in such a short amount of time. But whether you're a fan of Season 23 or not, one thing you cannot deny is the consistently wonderful performance from Colin Baker. And as he steps into the TARDIS, muttering about his distaste of carrot juice, just like that, the Sixth Doctor's era had come to a rather abrupt end. After originally appearing as Commander Maxil in 1983's Arc of Infinity, Colin very much doubted he would be in the series again, never mind playing the lead role. Much to his surprise, that would soon become a reality. Right from the get-go with his debut in The Twin Dilemma, you can tell this is a Doctor full of life, energy, and a more mysterious, unpredictable quality. One which may not have been demonstrated in the best way for his debut, but one that has remained a fascinating focus for millions of fans. Despite changes in format, shifting time slots, and even an 18-month hiatus, Colin always held his love for the role and the programme at large, attending several events and conventions to meet the many fans he had built, all with a smile and a genuine warmth, despite whatever was occurring behind the scenes. The greatest tragedy, arguably, being that after waiting so patiently to get back into the TARDIS for Season 23, the role he loved so much was snatched from underneath him, the higher-ups deciding he had his 3 years, even though technically, he'd really only done 2. Despite the poor treatment from the BBC, Colin would remain engaged with the Doctor Who fandom, becoming a regular fixture at conventions all across the world, sharing stories and anecdotes and providing joy to the millions who met him. In 1989, he would pilot the TARDIS again, this time on the stage, taking over from Jon Pertwee as the leading incarnation of The Ultimate Adventure. In 1993, he once again donned his coat of many colours for the makeshift 30th anniversary special, Dimensions in Time, which of course is canon. Towards the end of the 90s, when it was really uncertain if Doctor Who would ever return to television, Colin was one of the first former Doctors to join with Big Finish Productions, who began making regular audio adventures based on the series in 1999. This gave Colin a second chance in many respects, to refine his incarnation in the way he had originally wanted. Gone are many of the biting remarks or the endless bickering, and in their place is a warmth, but also a very sharp wit, one which Colin has been able to refine and develop over the past 20 years, and indeed still is today. Even now, at nearly 80 years old, Colin continues to delight Who fans the world over, whether via the audio adventures from Big Finish, or via his appearances at conventions, or indeed his appointment as president of the Doctor Who Appreciation Society. In the near 40 years since his first association with the programme, his love for Doctor Who, and the viewers who enjoy consuming it, has never been stronger. And despite uncertainties from audiences at the very beginning, Colin has since become the favourite incarnation of the Doctor to many a Whovian. Rock on, Sixie. In terms of your time on TV, you certainly deserve better. We must remember though, time waits for no man, and with very little time to assemble scripts for the upcoming new season, John Nathan Turner had one major task to fulfill to make it all come together. For the 3rd time, he would have to find a new actor to take control of the TARDIS. But who on earth would he choose? And how would all this play out in terms of the programme's viewing figures? You'll have to tune in next time to find out. So those are the ratings details for Season 23. I hope you enjoyed this numerical look back at the Doctor's time on trial, and whether you loved every second or loathed it from start to finish, it certainly is unique, and was able to secure the show's future, at least for the next few years. If you want to watch more Doctor Who content, then I highly recommend that you check out 3D Doctor Who. This creator is an exceptionally talented animator, and their latest series, Infiltration of the Daleks, is an absolutely stunning watch. Head over and subscribe because I'm sure this high quality work is only going to keep coming. If you want to read more about Doctor Who and the making of it, then I highly recommend the Complete History series of books, which I used as reference for this video. If you want to keep up to date with this series, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and if you want to see new episodes of the series early, then you can by supporting us on Patreon or via my Ko-fi page. Please consider leaving a like, subscribing to the channel, and leaving your thoughts on Season 23 in the comments section below. I've been Adam Martyn from AMTV, and we'll see you next time for Season 24